All right, Mike Allen, thank you very much for your reporting today. We really appreciate it. And I would just say here, as we head into what may be the most consequential week in the history of our democracy, the sense is not that we are getting calmer, that we have learned from what happened on Wednesday, that we are getting distance from that. The sense is instead that what we learned over the weekend shows just how bad this could have been, just how narrowly we avoided a much greater disaster than what already happened. And we are also not seeing this president back away in a significant way from what he did to incite his supporters last week. We are facing an inauguration in a few days with security challenges and the potential that this continues for months, if not years, into the Biden administration. We have a lot of work to do. And we need to be vigilant. Thank you for getting up way too early with us on this Monday morning. We always appreciate having you. Don't go anywhere. Morning Joe starts right now.
Sadly, the person who's running the executive branch is a deranged, unhinged, dangerous president of the United States. And only a number of days until we can be protected from him. But he has done something so serious that there should be prosecution against him.
Well, I gather that the 25th Amendment is off the table.
That isn't. Nothing is off the table.
Can't I hear?
Nothing is off the table. That includes a second Trump impeachment now on the fast track in the House as we get new information and new video from last week's horrendous attack on the Capitol. Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe. It is Monday, January 11th. 5 days after the attack on the Capitol, we continue to learn more about what actually happened there. Remember this video of an officer being chased and attacked and then running up the stairs, being chased by pro-Trump rioters. We now believe that this officer single-handedly led the mob away from the Senate chambers where the full Senate, including the vice president, were inside. You can see as they reach the top of the stairs, he looks over, and in between those two chairs is the Senate chambers. He pushes one of the protesters to get him to follow him away from the door, eventually leading them away from the Senate chamber. And here is new video that emerged this past weekend of the chilling events, a warning to our viewers that this video is disturbing.
The staff went under the table, barricaded the door, turned out the lights, and were silent in the dark
Under the table
under
this
the
whole time?
table for 2.5 hours.
During which time they listened to the invaders banging on that door, as you can hear on a recording from one of the staffers' phones. The FBI is investigating whether any of the agitators, some seen in ballistic vests with zip ties, intended to kidnap or kill legislators or their staffers. They were coming to find you, maybe to hurt you, I don't know.
The evidence is now that it was a well-planned, organized group with leadership and guidance and direction. And the direction was to go get people. They were vocally saying, "Where's the speaker? We know she has staff. They're here someplace. We're going to find them."
Let's be very clear about this. This was well organized. It was organized online. There was the goal of killing Nancy Pelosi. There was the goal of killing Mike Pence. Put that together, you have this mob that's focusing on decapitating the head of our constitutional government. The goal to kill the number 2 and the number 3 leaders, the number 2 and the 3 constitutional officers in the United States of America. And it was explicitly stated. We also found out this weekend, of course, that while Donald Trump was watching this, he was curious. He was confused. Not that all hell was breaking loose at the center of American democracy, but that more people around him weren't as excited as he was at the chaos that was going on. As Ben Sass said, all reports from inside the White House, the senator said that Donald Trump was delighted and excited while he was watching the Capitol riot go on. And let's call this what this is, okay? I said a couple of weeks ago, we need to just start going by definitions.
Okay.
All right? Let's stop trying to figure out what Donald Trump is, what his idea. He's a fascist. I said that well before this happened. He encourages violence. And this is not new. You know, I'm not going to even say her name. Is a writer that I've known for some time and respected. But one writer said that Donald Trump's turned bad. That Donald Trump said he turned even darker. Well, you know, that would be kind of hard for Nancy Pelosi and other people whose lives have been threatened over the past 4 or 5 years to decide that Donald Trump's just turned badder. Why don't we talk about what he said during the campaign when he kept talking about violence like a fascist leader does? Remember in August when he talked about Second Amendment solutions, that if we wanted to stop Hillary Clinton from getting elected and appointing Supreme Court justices, that Donald Trump said there were many in the crowd that could engage in Second Amendment solutions. I wrote at the time in the Washington Post, 2016, that Donald Trump had once again crossed a bloody line, and this time there was no coming back from it, that the Republicans needed to drop him as their nominee for president before something tragic happened. But they continued letting him do this after Charlottesville, talking about enemies of the people, praising a congressman for beating up a reporter who had just asked a question about health care, constantly glorifying violence. Who does this? Who does this? Fascists do this, and they have throughout history. Mussolini, read Mussolini's biography. What did he do? He would go out, he would give speeches, and right at the top of anything you read about Mussolini, he rose to power by inspiring people to go and attack and invade and to trash government buildings in Italy. And this was, we're going to show you a little bit of, in fact, I don't know if we have it right now. Do we have a little bit of Arnold Schwarzenegger?
This is very powerful.
Arnold Schwarzenegger, born in Austria 2 years after the end of World War II, talking about how he grew up with broken men who believed Hitler's lies. And it was one lie stacked on top of another lie, stacked on top of another lie. And those men believed those lies. And they and Austria and Germany paid the ultimate price for it. Here's Governor Schwarzenegger.
Before Schwarzenegger speaks, I want to weigh in on what they're talking about right here pertaining to a culture, a people that has been bamboozled, brainwashed, that has been deceived in believing in a lie. We know that our system is not perfect over here in America pertaining to our democracy and the way that we vote in people and vote out people. We know it's not perfect. But at the same time, we also know that any type of action similar towards what we have experienced just within the past few days is totally wrong in regards to a country attacking its own people inside its own country. If this was to have happened by a bunch of left-wing extremists over in Pakistan or Afghanistan or Iran or Iraq, it would have been declared as an act of war. A literal war of declaration would have been signed, and we would be looking at an act of war. If this was all Chinese, Japanese, Russians, it would have been an act of war. But because it's Americans attacking Americans, it's now looked upon as being an abscess. An abscess within our own government. And it's the very thing that I have tried to continue to warn my viewers about, that is exactly what our enemies want us to do. Our true enemies across the pond would love to see America fall down upon to itself by us attacking ourselves from the inside out. That's the very thing that caused Rome to fall. But once we become so weak and deteriorated in ourselves towards not being able to even fight ourselves, that's whenever the true enemy will come over here and just take us over. I continue to keep preaching that again and again and again, that this is the very thing that we do not need to do, is to turn on each other here in America. You know, we've seen places like Honduras. We've seen places like down in South America. We've seen places over in Africa that has done similar things like this, that has just added insult to injury pertaining to what they're trying to establish or accomplish in their particular little region or their area. Even China had enough sense that they postponed their election, if you want to call it an election, because they know on top of the coronavirus, it was only going to add more chaos and more confusion. And that's what China didn't need. And because China didn't need it, they postponed their election for a year or more because of the coronavirus. You keep in mind, China was going through similar events towards this right before the coronavirus hit, towards an uprising amongst its own people in China. Whenever you have people that has been engaged in believing in a lie in regards to this election, you have people that are sincere, but at the same time, they are sincerely wrong. It's just like the people over in the Middle East that the Christian society over here in America can look at and view of how come, why in the world would anybody strap a suicide vest on their bodies and go out amongst a public area and pull the detonator cord, knowing that they was not only going to do physical harm and hurt to themselves, but they was possibly going to kill as many as 100, 150 people and injure another 200 or 300, depending upon how big the crowd was, and then thinking that if they done this in their own sight, trying to convert converts, that they would immediately go to heaven, live with Allah, have 99 virgins, and drink all the wine that they wanted. We know that there's groups out there in the Middle East that purposely plant this seed in people's minds. That way they have volunteers that actually go out and promote such evil deeds as this. A lot of times they'll put them in a room, they'll drug them up. Whenever they wake up, they're in a room full of a bunch, in there with a bunch of whores, and they're having sex, and then they'll put them back to sleep again with drugs, and then they'll wake back up, and then they talk to them some more, and then they wake back up again after they drug them again, and they're in a room with a bunch of girls in there having sex. They do this periodically 4 or 5 times, maybe spending a month in transfigurating this person into them thinking that if they die in the name of Allah, they're going to wake up in that same room and have all the virgins that they want, have all the sex that they want, drink all the wine that they want. They have been manipulated. They have been deceived. They have been brainwashed, bamboozled. It's the same way with the election over here. People are sincere in believing what they believe, but they're believing in a hoax. They're believing in a lie pertaining to the election. Once you plant a seed in people's minds of deception, it can be very, very lethal in areas like you cannot even begin to imagine. And that's what we're seeing unfolding right here in front of our very eyes, pertaining to a bunch of people, a group of people that was on Donald Trump's side in believing that their cult leader deserves 4 more years of being in power towards the President of the United States. Well, if you cannot see by now, especially towards what has occurred this week, through this weekend, towards pulling dialogue up and figuring out just exactly what actually happened on Wednesday, January the 6th, if you can't see what type of person that Donald Trump is by now, in regards towards him being pleased during the siege of an American temple that is so sacred pertaining to our democracy that words cannot even begin to elaborate towards how sacred that it is, as this temple is being under siege, being attacked, and possibly killing his very own person that sat beside him, pertaining to it being the vice president and the Speaker of the House, that he was pleased during these moments. If you can't figure out what type of character that Donald Trump is by now, you'll probably never figure out who Donald Trump is. And it's the very thing that the media and various people have been trying to demonstrate and tell people about for now, I know, for over a year since the impeachment trials happened with the Ukrainians. It's the very thing that various people has been talking about toward even Donald Trump's own established family has went out and told people, we know how Donald Trump is. We know how he thinks. He's evil. He's wrong. He's basically a wolf in sheep's clothing. He's no good. We've had several testimonies like this coming from family members that has just been ignored. Well, the time for ignoring who Donald John Trump is no longer excusable to the American people. And not only is it not excusable to the American people, but it's not excusable to our politicians and to our lawmakers and our law enforcement agencies throughout this country. It's time for them to awaken towards what kind of trouble is now brewing. The same thing that's brewing over in the Middle East towards a group of people that is sincere. They're sincere. You got to admit, anybody that's willing to kill themselves is very passionate in what they believe. They're extremely sincere, but they're sincerely wrong. And that's the part that I'm trying to make on this particular viewing this morning on watching this program. Please listen to the rest of this.
Now, I grew up in Austria. I'm very aware of Kristallnacht, or the Night of Broken Glass. It was a night of rampage against the Jews carried out in 1938 at the Nazi equivalent of the Proud Boys. Wednesday was the day of broken glass right here in the United States. So being from Europe, I've seen firsthand how things can spin out of control. I know there is a fear in this country and all over the world that something like this could happen right here. Now, I do not believe it is, but I do believe that we must be aware of the dire consequences of selfishness and cynicism. Our democracy has been tempered by wars, injustices, and insurrections. I believe, as shaken as we are by the events of recent days, we will come out stronger because we now understand what can be lost.
We do understand that, but as Governor Schwarzenegger said, we now know, as we always have known, who Donald Trump is. He has revealed himself, and he will be driven from the public square. He will lose relevance. He will be chased by prosecutors for the rest of his life.
So far, the tech community and the golf community has chased him away. We'll see what the actual justice of our country does.
But the question is, what about Kevin McCarthy, a guy who actually inspired these traitors with his seditious words? What about Jim Jordan, who's getting the Presidential Medal of Freedom from Donald Trump, forever debasing that? Ask people who actually wrestled with him as a coach when he was in college whether he deserves anything. You look at Josh Hawley. You look at Ted Cruz, who just a few days before this act shouted, "We are not going to go quietly." Donald Trump talking about, we have to be strong, we can't be weak. March up to the Capitol. Don Jr. talking about, we're coming to get you. We're coming to get you, and it's going to be fun. Rudy Giuliani talking about combat justice. Combat justice. And there are some sad, pathetic human beings who continue to lie to you on other cable news networks, trying to convince you that all of those red hats, they're members of Antifa. I'll tell you, it's the largest gathering of Antifa in American history with all those red hats. I didn't know that Trumpers were, because law enforcement officers are saying that the people that they're arresting, most of the people that you've seen on your television screen over the past week, they have deep ties in the Trump community. No, this is the face of Donald Trump. This is the natural conclusion from Donald Trump. In 2015, in December of 2015, when we said on this show, when he had tried to push a Muslim ban, where this ends, what is this, Nazi Germany? Or is this just Germany in 1933? Well, here we are 5 years later. And a guy that's been like a fascist. He's been preaching violence to his supporters, been begging his supporters to engage in violence against the media.
Jeez.
And here we see him engaging in violence against the media, like Donald Trump has been asking them to do for 5 years, engaging in violence against his political opponents, and going to kill Nancy Pelosi and going to kill Mike Pence, a guy who still, I don't think, has heard from the President of the United States. Mika, this is what every tech company, this is what Facebook should have known is going to happen. This is on them. This is what Twitter should have known is going to happen. This is on them. This is on every media company that has promoted his hate speech. Every media company, new media company that has pushed every tweet out to 60 million people. It's on all of us. It's on all of us, but it's especially on Facebook, Twitter, now Parler, and all of those companies that allowed these conspiracy theories to spread like
a vicious
weeds.
cancer.
Like a vicious cancer across the American political system. And my friends, and some of your friends, they believe the lies. Why? Because they wake up in the morning, they turn on Facebook. They wake up in the morning and they look at their Twitter feed. They wake up in the morning and they look at some crankpot on some cable news channel who is spreading the lies from Parler, Facebook, or Twitter. And that is their reality. They have put down their Bibles, right? They don't read their Bibles anymore. They now read Facebook.
They've either put down their Bibles or they have contaminated the Bible by believing that it's okay to live in sin, and because the Lord Jesus Christ is such of a forgiving, graceful inspirer that come from God himself, that God is going to forgive us and the pearly gates are still going to be open for all. They have been bamboozled. They have been deceived. And they have allowed themselves to be deceived this way. That's one of the reasons why that the church community has risen up against the windmill ministries the way that it has, is because it don't no longer support the righteousness and the trueness of the teachings coming from the Bible. It's very, very simple towards what has occurred here. We are in probably one of the most dangerous states, a dangerous state of mind as a whole here in America as we have ever been. And I knew this when we got attacked by 9/11 and we wound up going up against the wrong party pertaining to Libya and going after Saddam Hussein that supposedly had weapons of mass destruction and did not have none. I knew at that point in time the way that the people was elevated during that attack towards them not being elevated, that we as a society over here in America was in trouble. Because whenever we look at how our ancestors reacted on a similar reaction pertaining to being attacked by Pearl Harbor, we see a complete, total movement that was engaged in that during the time that it occurred. We have become too chalant. We have become too liberal whenever it comes to us standing up for our Christian values. And I think just about any preacher, any evangelist, any true person of God would tell you that's one of the things that has occurred here in these troublesome times that we're all now facing here in America. Sorry about my phone dropping. Sometimes it'll do that whenever I have it perched right here. occasionally it will fall. Sorry about that. But I hope that my viewers understand this, that we are in a very, very critical time in history, not just for Americans, but for the planet in general, that has been deceived, that has been bamboozled this way.
They don't worship Jesus Christ anymore. You can tell by their actions. Jesus said, judge a tree by its fruits. Okay, well, look at those images. And they worship Donald Trump. And their Bible is now what they read in the conspiracy theories on Facebook and on Twitter. People, Mika, everybody begged Facebook and Twitter for 5 years to control this man. Begged them for 5 years. They didn't do it. This is what happened.
We thought it was a gift, but the gift to us has turned out to be a Trojan horse, because now they can infiltrate us on various levels towards hacking into our bank accounts, finding out our identity, going into corporations, even hacking the Pentagon and other big known corporations. We thought it was a gift, but instead of it being a gift, it has turned out to be the Trojan horse, the very thing that has manipulated people's minds and hearts that could possibly throw this nation off into total chaos. That's what he's trying to say.
This is what happened, Mark Zuckerberg. This is what happened, Sheryl Sandberg. I hope it was worth it. I hope your billions were worth it. Jack, I hope wherever you're crossing your legs and doing yoga or taking an ice bath or a mud bath, I hope it was worth it, because the blood of these Capitol Hill cops, these deaths are on Donald Trump. These deaths are on...
That could just very well be the tip of the iceberg towards something that is just now beginning or starting here in America. I've said all along that we as an American society was set up or sabotage in regards to all these drugs, because if you look at what the intentions of drugs is supposed to do, it's supposed to make people confused, delirious. It's supposed to make them bewildered, dumbfounded. And it's done just exactly that. Either the people that's on drugs or the people that needs to be on drugs towards controlling their actions. But it has done just exactly that since the drug culture has originated since the 60s. Talking about the sexual revolution. Talking about changing America. Changing our thoughts. Changing our ideals. Changing our morals. Changing our values. This is where we are today. And it's very, very disturbing. It's disturbing enough that whenever this occurred Wednesday, it upset my nerves so bad that I had diarrhea for 2 days and couldn't get out to the public. And it wasn't until yesterday I finally decided that I was safe enough to go down to Dyersburg and spend a little time down there towards doing some shopping. That's how bad that this upset me. It literally made tears come to my eyes to see the American flag, the red, white, and blue colors, be abused and desecrated the way that it was desecrated Wednesday, and to see our precious capital, our sacred temple, with a bunch of monkeys climbing on it and doing what they was doing to it. It literally made me cry, because it was so emotional during the time that I watched it. And believe it or not, it was only by the hand of God that caused it to be as minimized as what it was, because if it wasn't for God, I truly believe that it could have wound up being 1,000 times worse than what it was. 1,000 times worse.
On Josh Hawley, these deaths are on Ted Cruz. These deaths, those screaming, that pain, All of that is on you. It's on the top Republican in the House of Representatives who continues. Now he's saying, oh, let's just put this all behind us. Let's just put this all behind us and come together and say, no. I understand it may be hard for some Republicans on Capitol Hill to understand this, but justice under the law comes first, and then reconciliation.
Let's bring in former U.S. Attorney, now an NBC News law enforcement analyst, Chuck Rosenberg. Former U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Alabama and MSNBC legal analyst Joyce Vance, an NBC News correspondent covering national security and intelligence, Ken Delanian. The AP's Jonathan Lemire and NBC's Casey Hunt are with us as well.
So, Chuck, what do we have as far as responsibility for the rioters, responsibility for people like Rudy Giuliani, inciting them by talking about marching up to the Hill and engaging in combat justice? Don Jr.
You know, in a way, this is worse than terrorism, because terrorism is whenever our own countrymen is siding with the enemy, the known enemy, over across the pond. This is actually worse than terrorism, because it's happening amongst ourselves. These people should all be rounded up and arrested. Rudy Giuliani, Donald Trump's son. There should be a major court, and we're not talking about just in the defiance towards impeachment. No. There should be a tribunal court, a military court that questions various Republican leaders who have stained their actions for life because of this. And they should be persecuted to the fullest extent of the law. No one is above the law. Nancy Pelosi, many others, let everyone know that no one was above the law. And that includes all these people that engaged in this type of activity. That is, it's treacherous. It's like I said, it goes beyond treason. It's the most horrifying thing that I think that I personally have ever seen, and I've seen some pretty horrifying things. We've all seen some pretty horrifying things. But if you'll put this in the right perspective, this has got to be the worst. And it was a cancer that has been growing. It is lies upon top of lies. You know, Donald Trump's whole persona, ever since he got into office, was in a violent type tactic. You know, he's going to beat this one up. He can shoot this one on Fifth Avenue, and no one never question him. I mean, if you look at the things that he's been talking about since he's become president, it has violent intentions to it. And now it's led to this.
Here, talking about, we're coming after you if you don't support my daddy. We're coming after you, and it's going to be fun.
You know, Joe, I think there's a lot of people who can be charged, and I understand the desire for swift justice. There's a second value that's really important here, too, which is thorough justice. Meaning, as quickly as we want to move because these people are dangerous and these people are vile and these people are criminals, we also want to make sure that we understand all of what happened. Who said what? One of the hardest things, and I know Joyce knows this, in any criminal case is to prove intent. And by the way, those things you were just talking about, Twitter and Facebook, the platforms that these criminals use to advance their cause will also be a terrific source of evidence for prosecutors and investigators. So as quickly as I hope we move, and I hope we move with alacrity, we also need to make sure that we get the right people for the right crimes in the right way. And if that...
Look at how many times Donald Trump has stalled various legislators in wanting to shut the government down. He himself has made reference to, well, the government just needs to be shut down. He has been a thorn in their side, knowing that we have been pushed to the edge in regards to being trillions of dollars in debt. He has been nothing but a thorn in the side towards making things worse instead of making it better. Or advertise down in the Mexican region about the caravans that are now coming up from the south going to merge into America. Basically just giving them a green light and advertising it, exacerbating the problem that much more towards distributing that type of information down into those people. He's used reverse tactics. And he's been very, very crafty at doing it. But now, I think people are waking up to just exactly who Mr. Donald John Trump truly is.
It takes a little more time. I'm okay with that. Justice needs to come down very, very hard on what happened. It was not just a crime, but a riot. Not just a riot, but an insurrection. And so doing it right and doing it quickly is a value here, Joe.
Well, the hard thing, Chuck, as you say, is to prove intent. I wonder how many of the people, Joyce Vance, will say that the reason they stormed the Capitol was to answer to Donald Trump and to answer to the calls of these people. Take a look.
We will not go quietly into the night. We need to march on the Capitol today.
We are going to take our country back.
We're coming for you, and we're going to have a good time doing it.
So, let's have trial by combat.
You'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength. We're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you. We're going to walk down.
And I'm all for the country being straightened out. Don't think that I'm not. Inciting towards things that has gotten off kilter. But you don't do it with force, and you don't do it by causing chaos, this type of chaos amongst your own people. Because in actuality, your attempts are actually going to backfire, and you're actually going to exacerbate the problem even worse, because now you're trying to heal the country by creating more wounds. And that's not how you heal your body. That's not how you heal your mind. And that's not how you heal your community. That's not how you heal your family. And it's not how you heal your nation. You don't create more wounds in thinking that that's going to heal the old wounds by creating new wounds. That's not the proper way of healing. I agree. Things is out of proportion. Things need to be changed. Various legislators need to look at things and change it. I mean, they don't have no problem at all in sticking together towards giving one another a raise whenever they decide to give one another a raise. But yet now they'll haggle and debate for 5 or 6 months on giving out a stimulus check to the American people, knowing that people are suffering, knowing that they've lost their businesses, knowing that they're at the point of being evicted, knowing that the problems that has been brought upon to the American people. I agree. It needs to be changed. But you don't change it this way. You're only exacerbating the problem. You're making things even worse.
To the Capitol.
So, Joyce, those people then went straight to the Capitol and stormed it, rioted it, ransacked it, vandalized it, killed people, and stole things. Is it going to be really that hard to prove intent? What are the challenges moving ahead for accountability?
This is such an unprecedented situation. It is so difficult because we all know that in the court of public opinion, it's a rare instance where the public watched the potential crimes in progress. We know what happened. We know that there was, in essence, an effort to light a fire and that fire...
So they need to be rounded up. The people that caused this need to be rounded up immediately.
Caught. And
like I said, it don't need to be a traditional court as far as what they're talking about pertaining to an impeachment trial again. No. This needs to go in front of the military, a tribune court, and they need to be tried as traitors in the highest ranking department of our military that you can think of. That's where it needs to go. That's where the trials need to begin. Whenever you have the whole world that has sat back and watched this, if you can't call it what it is, then something is obviously wrong with the person that has viewed it and not understanding what has occurred here.
Up on Capitol Hill. And the cut to the chase question, Mika, is whether people who engaged in speech at the top, people who spoke to the crowd and encouraged them, are they legally responsible for all of the consequences? And as Chuck says,
Facebook, social media platforms, they should have shut this down whenever they seen this boiling and coming to this type of a deal. They should have realized that this is all a Jerry Springer type atmosphere that is going to lead the American people down the wrong road. Once more, we thought it was a gift. Our gift has turned out to be the Trojan horse. Our gift has turned out to be our enemy.
That comes down to the issue of intent. I think this sounds a little bit cold and sticky when we're thinking about Wednesday's events. It seems so obvious that people should be held accountable. And there's no doubt that in a political sense and in a very real human sense, we know that those words have meaning. Just like we watched the president talk in advance of the efforts to kidnap Governor Whitmer in Michigan, and his words had meaning. And so the question is whether investigators will be able to prove, really to jump into the minds of these people who spoke Wednesday.
To prove, the proof is in the pudding. I guarantee you if this happened in Russia or China, they would have already done a roundup. They would have done a roundup. And some people would have been put in some places that they ordinarily don't think that they'd ever be put in. Including Rudy Giuliani towards discretion by combat. The word combat means violence, means bloodshed. He knew exactly what was coming down the pike. He knew exactly. And not only did he know, but it was a conspiracy that was organized, that was confounded by the leader of the free world, Donald John Trump.
And determine, was there intent to impose violence on the Capitol? And
it was intended to turn into nothing but a bloodbath. If the guards that day at the Capitol didn't realize what was going on and use reverse psychology, rather than go through the proper protocol, which was to lay into them and start dropping them like flies to seeing how many people that they could kill with their with their clip of guns, rather than them use proper protocol, they used reverse psychology, such as, hey, we know we're overwhelmed here. And even though they didn't raise a white flag in surrendering, in actuality, that's what they had to do. They did surrender emotionally, psychologically and professionally. And they went along with, some of them went along with the troublemakers, the rioters, because at that point in time, they knew that that was going to be the only way that they could resolve this in a halfway peaceful way. I think the same thing happened to a police station. If I'm not mistaken, it was in Portland, Oregon or somewhere. It may have been Ferguson or somewhere. But the police officers were so overwhelmed because it was such of a group of people that was coming at them. They realized by using traditional methods was only going to exacerbate the problem even worse. So they immediately used reverse psychology and said, okay, we'll give in. We'll let you take over. You can have the precinct. And they wound up burning the daggum police station down to the ground. Y'all remember what happened this year. We're fully aware towards what had to happen in order to maintain peace, if you want to call it peace. It was a disrupted peace, and some people did get injured and killed. But if these officers didn't respond and react the way that they did, do you realize what type of bloodshed and what type of horror that could have been unleashed on not just a few, but possibly hundreds upon hundreds of people that would have been dead, including various people that work in the House? The vice president, they was after him. Speaker of the House, they was after her. This whole thing could have escalated into something that the American people would have never, ever dreamed could have occurred right here in the United States. If God did not give those men the insight towards knowing how to respond to such of a rootless group of people like this. I'm telling you, if it wasn't for God that tried to tone it down, this whole thing could have been 1,000 times worse than what the American people and the world would have visually seen right in front of our very eyes. We would have seen catastrophe after catastrophe after catastrophe on both sides. So don't think for a second that just because it didn't turn out to be a major bloodbath, that these same people should not still be held accountable in the same form, because they should. Beginning with the leader, Donald Trump, his son, various people that was holding Donald Trump up, including Rudy Giuliani. They should all be rounded up. This thing pertaining to the 25th Amendment, towards trying to say that Donald J. Trump is not within his right mind and he shouldn't be held responsible for his own actions because we're pleading an insanity plea, throw that completely out the door. He knew exactly what this could have materialized into. And if the truth be known, he's probably disappointed that it didn't. If the truth be known. And not only is he disappointed, but others that formigated this type of a movement are probably disappointed that it didn't wind up being nothing but an onslaught.
I think is the most important question. There seems to be little doubt in my mind that the intent was to stop or interfere with the finalization of the Electoral College vote for Joe Biden. And if in fact evidence develops that a group of people conspired, agreed to take whatever steps necessary to prevent that from happening, that will be the most important area for investigators to push on. Like Chuck says, we need to know what the ongoing risks are, who was involved, what they had planned, and then we need to hold all of them accountable.
And we know the clear purpose was Kindlanian to interfere with a constitutional requirement of counting the electoral votes. We know that Donald Trump had circled that date along with his golf caddy and put out videos for weeks saying, circle the date, January the 6th. It's going to be wild. They wanted to interrupt the vote count. They incited those people. They did interrupt the vote count. But it's interesting, Ken, after the dust settled, you had Capitol Hill cops and others saying, oh, we never saw this coming. We have found out now that was the lie. The New York Times have laid out several things this morning, but you were reporting this weekend that the Capitol Hill police were getting warnings from a variety of sources, some even outside the state.
Yes.
That's right, Joe. And it wasn't just the Capitol Police. In the 48 hours after this happened, a number of officials said, including the head of the FBI's Washington field office on Friday, said we had no indication that this would be anything other than a peaceful protest. The D.C. police chief said on Thursday, we had no intelligence that anyone was going to storm the Capitol. Well, NBC News had reported last week about postings talking about a conspiracy to occupy the Capitol. It was obvious to all of us that that wasn't true. The things that those people were saying were not accurate. Mm-hmm. Well, finally, over the weekend, a senior FBI official told us that, in fact, the FBI did know that there were people planning violence. And that, in fact, some FBI agents actually reached out to some extremists who were on their radar. They call it a knock and talk. They went to visit some of these people who they think were planning to travel to D.C. and basically said, if you do this, we're going to arrest you. And so they stopped some of those people. And that's great, but that raises the question of, okay, then why didn't you put out an intelligence bulletin? Why didn't you make sure that the Capitol was defended?
Exactly.
Look, the Capitol Police is justifiably taking a lot of blame for the security failure here. They did not have a defensive perimeter. They did not have officers deployed in riot gear. But the Capitol Police is not responsible for stopping acts of domestic terrorism in the United States, Joe.
That's right.
The FBI is.
That's right.
And so why didn't the FBI disrupt this? Well, they're telling us now that they had no intelligence about an organized plot. And as you said, the New York Times is laying out evidence this morning. There was lots of organization here. There was lots of conspiracy talk on social media. And that's really raising questions about, did the FBI see this? If not, why not? And I'm really glad that we have Joyce and Chuck here because we can talk about this issue of there's no...
I know for a fact that they seen it because I myself put out material to ex-U.S. Marshals, judges, law enforcement agencies all over this country. I've been pushing anywhere from 110 to 125 gigabytes of material out to my viewing base a month. And I know for a fact that the material that I put out there pertaining to a coup was put out there by the Windmill Ministries. Now, naturally, if people want to continue to keep ignoring the words coming from the Windmill Ministries, they're going to let something like this, an onslaught, come up onto us simply because they didn't believe. They didn't believe. It wasn't that they didn't know. They knew. The FBI, various judges, various law enforcement agencies, they knew. They just didn't believe. They couldn't conceive that something like this would actually formulate right here in the good old USA. Well, we're invincible. Nobody's going to take 2 airplanes and turn them into missiles and drive them off into 2 skyscrapers and cause 3,000 people to die. But it happened. It happened. This was so upsetting to me. Like I said a while ago, and I'm fixing to let this go. And it's been a very decent program this morning. This has been so upsetting with me that on the day of, after I got through going through my emotional state of crying and understanding what was going on, I got to thinking to myself, what do I need to do? You know, after I got through the emotional part, then anger started building up. And as I got angered, then I thought, well, how can I protect myself? What do I need to do? So I immediately done an inventory of everything that I got out here, and I realized, oh, I still got a 100-gallon propane tank that I need to go fill up. And I immediately got in my truck, loaded up the 100-pound propane tank, and went to Union City to get it filled up. Just so happens the guy that was working there that day, I don't know what his problem was, but he denied me having access to being able to fill my tank up. So I had to drive all the way to Martin to do a tank exchange up here at one of the facilities in Martin, just to be able to make sure that I had plenty of propane, because I don't want to get caught into a escapade. I don't want to get caught up into some sort of ordeal coming down the pike pertaining to it being a national event right here in the wintertime, towards not being able to stay warm during the winter. So I was trying to regain my resources, and just exactly what do I need to do? How do I need to take care of myself? This is sad. Whenever we have such deranged, dumbfounded people that's supposed to be hired to protect us and take care of us, that has allowed a breach to happen again and again and again. And I'm going to let you know something. I'm pissed. I'm pissed because I'm tired of seeing too many innocent people die on account of people not doing their jobs. Just like 9/11. As far as I'm concerned, heads should have rolled during 9/11 of people that allowed for those airplanes to be turned into missiles. Talk about dropping the ball. Whenever you have flight attendants down in Florida that claimed, oh yeah, we trained them all towards how to fly an airplane, but wasn't none of them concerned towards how to land it. Oh, really? And that didn't raise a red flag? It's sickening. It's sickening how vulnerable that we have become because of people being mentally deranged, or they're not capable of doing their jobs. And it's time for accountability actions to be taken to make sure that we're double sure that something like this never, ever occurs again in the United States of America. And like I said a while ago, if this would have happened in Russia or China or any other communist-controlled country, there would have already been a roundup. There would have been a roundup. There would have been warrants served. People would be spending time right now in some sort of military facility towards a tribunal court to be held to the highest extent of the law. There's not a question in my mind that it would have already occurred in some of these other countries. And to be quite frank with you, they may not even had a tribunal court in some of those countries, because this was all done on live TV and the proof is in the pudding, and they may have been immediately served as being guilty, and whatever that their punishment is in their country would have been validated because they would have pursued it. Whatever that they felt like was validated as far as the punishment, they would have pursued it. I don't even know that there would have been a court, a hearing, a trial. Not whenever the proof is in the pudding. You got it all on tape. It was happening on a national event. People need to wake up to our adversary that is out to kill, steal, and destroy. That is the author of confusion that the Bible talks about, pertaining to the Bible saying that in the last days Satan will rise up in great wrath because he knows that his time is short. Like I said, I agree that changes need to be made in our institutions. We need to change certain policies and certain things that we have we have adapted or adopted and let it get by with. There's lots of things that needs to be changed, but to do it in forming a coup, which I put out to my people about a week before this occurred, towards the possibility of a coup, because God was leading me in that direction. To do it in this form is not the right way to do it. This is not the right way, because this is only going to exacerbate the problem, and there's going to be many, many people that's going to die innocently because of pursuing something in this way. So it needs to be nipped at the bud. We need to see accountability from our highest law enforcement agencies, beginning at the top, cleaning up what has happened here. Good luck to all of us as we end every session with the Windmill Ministries at 291 Thompson Road, Sharon, Tennessee, zip code 38255. Good luck to all of us, and God bless. God bless America, and shalom.